my followers, or welcome if it's the first time that you are watching my YouTube channel, My Paranormal and Mystery TV. This is the 8th documentary I'm shooting about the murder of Brandon Lee. And I really pray God and all the investigators that the next documentary I will shoot about Brandon Lee and also Bruce Lee will be the final one, because finally, after all this time, I can reveal you the reason why Brandon Lee was murdered, the real motive. The investigation led to catch the murderer or murderers of Brandon Lee. I want to stress that if you want to know everything about every detail about the mechanism of the prop gun on the set of The Crow, and if you want to know many curiosities about Brandon Lee and also the movie The Crow, all the deleted scenes, all the scenes shot after Brandon Lee's death, with the help of computer and his double. If you want to know why I immediately realized that Brandon Lee was murdered, and it wasn't because of negligence, even if there was so much negligence in the set of The Crow. But in the case of Brandon Lee, it was premeditated murder, taking advantage of the fact of the chaos in that devastating setting in Wilmington. No cars. Many accidents during the shooting of the movie were due to the location, Wilmington in North Carolina, in full winter. So it was normal that a hurricane devastated almost all the set of The Crow, but there wasn't any cars. There was somebody or more people who were waiting in the shadows to kill Brandon Lee. Because I want to tell you also this. If you want to know all the rare curiosities about the movie and all other curiosities, as the real scene in which Brandon Lee was shot, the rush in hospital, and all the investigation following his death, I suggest you my previous documentary. Immediately I tell you, and then I show you the videos and the concrete files, because I'm stating this. First of all, I want to stress that I do these documentaries for free. I'm not paid even 1 cent. So I'm not doing this for money, but to give justice to Brandon Lee and also to Bruce Lee. And the other times I told you all the investigation leads to rule out. And now I must confess you that I was right, that it was a premeditated murder. But there was the only investigation lead. At the beginning I rule out because I didn't know what I know today. I didn't know about the secret of Brandon Lee. Brandon Lee had several several diaries, secret diaries, copybooks, in which he wrote down his investigation about the murder of his father, Bruce Lee. Exactly. I also did a documentary, Bruce Lee, Death, it was murder, and I was right too. I was wrong about the right investigation leads to catch the murderers of Brandon Lee and give him finally the justice he deserves, and also Bruce Lee, even if 52 years and 32 years passed by. I was telling you that Brandon Lee had secret diaries, copybooks, in which there was written all the proofs of the murder of his father, Bruce Lee, all the contradictions about his autopsy, and it was a murder. And then he also had a secret tape. And think about that in all these years, many people admired Brandon Lee, loved Brandon Lee, loved Bruce Lee, but they forgot something important. They weren't only stars who then now they are myths, but first of all they were people, and they know that nowadays they are legends, myths, but what they really want is justice, they want that all the world know that they were both murdered by the same mastermind. Because Brandon Lee was secretly investigating on the murder of his dad. And when I got to these secret diaries with the unmistakable handwriting of Brandon Lee, and then what happened? Few months ago, I'm talking about April 2025, so a few months before, the tomb of Brandon Lee has been reopened. Also the coffin has been reopened because the tomb, the gravestone, cracked. They think that there were tourists who didn't pay much attention to the tomb, or animals. I know the truth. It was Brandon Lee screaming justice from the tomb, or many crows that ruined a part of his grave to make his coffin reopen and to discover into it something shocking I'm going to reveal you and make you see too. Do you understand that what I just discovered? Brandon Lee was murdered because he was secretly investigating on the death of his father. This is the reason why he was so afraid to die. And he wrote in his diaries words like eyes are watching me. And he was talking about a traitor in the circle. What did he mean? A traitor in the circle of his father Bruce Lee, or a traitor into the set of The Crow? Ooh, a real projectile on that gun destined only to him to kill him. They didn't open Bruce Lee's tomb or coffin, but the one of Brandon Lee. Brandon Lee doesn't rest in peace at all, and he will find finally the peace he's looking for with justice, the same justice he wanted to give his father Bruce Lee. Do you think that the perfect murder exists? No, it doesn't. Otherwise, if you haven't watched one of my last documentaries about ghosts who made their murders solve, catch their murderers, and condemned either to death penalty, this is the reason why I believe that it's not too late to give justice to Brandon Lee, and so also to Bruce Lee too. Now, I don't speak anymore. I want you to watch all these videos and files. Chilling. Warning! Some images could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers. Here you see the legendary Bruce Lee. I start.
His father, Bruce Lee. Brandon also passed away at a young age. Do you think this was an accident or was it done on purpose?
This is when the death of Brandon Lee had been officially revealed to the press.
Heart stopped and efforts to resuscitate him were unsuccessful.
Wednesday afternoon, Brandon Lee was pronounced dead. The autopsy revealed some shocking information.
A .44 caliber bullet was removed from Lee's body. Detectives are proceeding with the investigation.
You don't see a .44 caliber slug on a movie set, and it's just that simple.
Ed Parker Jr. is a martial arts expert, an actor who appears in a new film biography about Bruce Lee. His father trained Bruce Lee back in the 60s. He says some in the martial arts world believe that Brandon Lee was murdered.
First talking about it being a projectile, then it being a .44 caliber slug. It goes from an accident to murder.
Brandon
Accident happened on the set.
Others are still asking questions.
So something is terribly, terribly wrong here. And either, somebody's trying to murder him or there's some kind of gross negligence.
The question...
Before, at the private funeral of Brandon Lee, you recognized the mythical actor Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal never changed his mind, and once he said, I will take Brandon Lee's murderer. And listen to this interview of some years ago. Steven Seagal, aged, reveals something very important. Listen to him.
He's dead, but the guy shot a blank gun at him. How could he be dead? He's dying. He's severely hurt, maybe dead. And I said, you will find a projectile in him. You'll find a bullet in him. And they said, that can't be. You're crazy. And I said, you will find a bullet in him. And they called me in the morning. And they said, you're amazing. And I said, why? And they said, there was a bullet in him. And I can go through the whole story on what really happened, which most people don't know. But the long and the short is when Brandon passed like that, I didn't sleep for 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
It just reminded me too much of certain things. And
I think that Steven Seagal knows who murdered both Brandon Lee and his friend Bruce Lee. And he was completely right, because the investigation lead is that one. This is an interview made to Brandon Lee about a year before being murdered. And if you listen to him, he hints about why his father could have been murdered. Listen to him.
Martial arts.
We got the whole family here tonight, so you gotta be careful. My dad originated an art while he was alive that was called Jeet Kune Do. This was my father's personal expression of the martial arts. He had a circle of students that he taught while he was alive, and through that circle of students, one of whom has gone on to continue to be my teacher, actually. The art of Jeet Kune Do has continued to exist in the world.
Oh, I see. I mean, it wasn't something that was taught. Your dad was really the first guy to sort of teach Caucasians and other races how to do this, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he ran into a great deal of flack about that, actually, in the community where he came over and first was teaching to Caucasians. He ran into some flack from other Asian martial arts factions in that community because up until that time, the individual arts were very much separate. There was no transfer of information between the arts whatsoever. And that was part of what I think my father was interested in trying to see broken down. And there was certainly no transfer between the Asians and the Caucasian races. Yeah. And it was almost considered kind of like an Asian secret weapon or something.
Yeah.
You know, not to make too big a deal of it, but that certainly did exist at the time, and my dad helped break that barrier down.
Is it different among Asian communities? I mean, is Korean martial arts that much different from Japanese?
A lot of different martial arts, yeah, they grow out of a culture. Sometimes there'll be something that is passed down through a family from generation to generation.
Why don't you tell me a story?
You can't say at this stage of the film whether it's going to be a big hit or whether it's going to bomb. But I know this, it's going to be very interesting.
In 1993, 2 decades after Bruce Lee's death at 32 years old, his son Brandon at 28 living under two shadows. The man he called Dad and a modern-day legend and cultural icon.
It's not hard at all to live with the memory of him. The memory of him is what I cherish. It's the myth of him that causes any problems.
Brandon set to achieve in life what Bruce only attained in death.
Brandon Lee, pure talent, pure beauty, and pure courage. Take him to his end. Let's delve.
The Crow's big screen adaptation offered Brandon all he needed to forge his own legacy.
Is that gasoline I smell?
Sure, the movie had action, but despite Brandon's extensive martial arts background, including at-home training with a kung fu master,
you have one chance to live.
Eric Draven would showcase the difference between Brandon and Bruce.
My father, he himself, considered himself a martial artist first and an actor second, and I consider myself an actor first.
He confided in me before he ran out of breath.
Right now it's tired. It's a tired mood, but it's good.
E.T. on the set with Brandon just 3 weeks before he'd be bound forever to his father's memory in a horrific and suspicious accidental shooting.
Oh, it gets better.
On March 31st, Brandon...
This was one of the last interviews of Brandon Lee before being murdered.
Film, it's one where I feel very justified from the character's point of view in carrying out the violence that takes place.
Your job will be to tell the rest of them that death is coming for them tonight.
Eric's got a chance to personally not only get revenge, but hopefully also get a reward for it and be with Shelley again.
Tapping into these emotions was easy for Brandon, who was days out from tying the knot with his longtime love, Eliza.
I'm going to get married right after the film. I found a wonderful woman. I'll marry her. It's going to be great.
Brandon was sitting on the couch next to me. He goes, I got to go work out at the gym, got to come home and watch the basketball game. He goes, I feel like a real person for the first time in weeks.
An eyewitness opening up 2 days later about watching Brandon Lee's final performance as co-star Michael Massey fired the fatal round.
This was the doctor who operated Brandon Lee.
Penetrating wound near his umbilicus or belly button. I know that during the surgery itself, he received at least 40 or more units of blood, and it's a relatively small wound.
The investigation uncovering a series of poor decisions and guilty parties. In fact, too much blame across too many people, leaving no way to directly charge anyone for Brandon's shooting.
But you look in the mirror, you need professional help.
As for the on and off screen shooter, Massey, he continued acting but was forever traumatized by pulling that trigger, rarely talking of the experience before he died of stomach cancer in 2016. But there was
the movie The Crow
was an adaptation of a comic book series of the same name written by James O'Barr. The series was inspired by two true stories. One was O'Barr's personal tragedy of losing his fiancée at a young age before they were about to get married. She was hit by a drunk driver and died. O'Barr found himself overwhelmed with grief and rage, and after many unsuccessful attempts of trying to numb himself to the pain that he felt, he decided to channel all that energy into his writing. Also standard practice for actors involved in gunfire scenes to wear bulletproof vests, even though blanks are being fired. It was also reported that the film's firearms supervisor had gone home for the day when the accident happened. With the supervisor gone, it's possible that the prop team did not know all the checks that needed to be done before using the gun in the scene. With all that being said, if a weapons expert had been on set, they would have instructed.
There is a reason why the expert was in the set. It's not necessary to be smart and very intelligent to understand that that night the expert who had to check up the firearms was sent home before the normal time because they told him that there shouldn't have been scenes with firearms anymore for that night. This is the reason why the expert who had to check up the guns, the firearms, was sent home early. And this was a premeditated trap to kill Brandon Lee. What I'm going to make you watch later when the tomb, only the tomb of Brandon Lee, not the one of Bruce Lee, cracked, and they found something that confirmed the investigation lead to follow to catch the murderer or murderers of Brandon Lee. I go on.
Next to his father Bruce at Lakeview Cemetery in Seattle. No criminal charges were filed, and it was deemed an accident by authorities. Brandon's mother did file a lawsuit for negligence that was settled. Brandon's fiancée Eliza was also included in the settlement. Once the news about this got out, many rumors came out as well. People said that the bullet was placed in the gun intentionally.
I want to remind for all the people who haven't watched my previous documentaries about the murder of Brandon Lee that after this no accident, but at that time the mother, the fiancé thought about a tragic accident. And the mother wanted to denounce the production and the people involved for negligence. And there were 13 people who had to go on trial for negligence. Instead, it was all settled down out of court because they had been offered to the mother of Brandon Lee, Linda Lee Cadwell, and the fiancée, Eliza Hutton, about $2.5 million not to denounce these 13 people anymore. And they agreed with this. I want to say something. What the hell? What the fuck? it's not the point, because it wasn't a negligence, because Brandon Lee was intentionally murdered, and then later I will show you the concrete proofs. But even if it was a gross negligence and not an intentional manslaughter, if I were the mother or the fiancé of Brandon Lee, are you kidding? This disgusted me very much. Sorry, this is my humble opinion. But if Brandon Lee had been my son or my boyfriend, I would have fought to discover the whole truth. But this is my personal opinion, and now it's not more important, because we are talking about an intentional, premeditated murder. Brandon Lee was murdered because he discovered something really chilling about the murder of his father, Bruce Lee. And so I go on.
Death, his manager actually complained to producers, asking if they were trying to kill his client. Most of the shooting was done at night, with artificial rain and winds most nights. Brandon would be barefoot and freezing. He reportedly lost 20 pounds, but even
so no cars in the set of The Crow. It was because it was shot in Wilmington, North Carolina, in full winter, where safety protocols are not strictly followed. Taxes are lower, and in full winter, hurricanes happen very often. And have you heard the manager call the producers, accusing them to try to kill Brandon Lee? And now, I want to make you hear again a passage from the first and last interview of Michael Massey in 2005. This interview passed unnoticed, maybe because some people made it past unnoticed, because what Michael Massey revealed was the key to understand that it was a murder, because listen what he stated.
Is too bad, you know.
The thing is, it wasn't supposed to happen.
It absolutely wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't even supposed to be handling the gun in the scene till we started shooting the scene, and the director changed it. It wasn't supposed to happen.
Have you heard, Michael Massey? This is the reason why Brandon didn't wear the bulletproof vest. It was a trap, and Michael Massey a collateral victim too, because he took this trauma for all his life. And now watch.
Kung Fu, the movie. His journey continued as he took the lead in Legacy of Rage, a classic Hong Kong-style action film, and later collaborated with Ernest Borgnine in the action-packed Laser Mission in 1989. I've always wanted to be an actor. I never wanted to do anything else even when I was in elementary school, Brandon said in an interview with the Ottawa Citizen in 1992. During the early 90s, Brandon took the spotlight in action movies like Showdown in Little Tokyo and Rapid Fire. His performances often sparked comparisons to renowned action icons like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jean-Claude Van Damme, but most frequently he was associated with his father. Becoming a father himself was a dream that Brandon eagerly anticipated, envisioning the journey alongside his fiancée Eliza Hutton. Their relationship showcased his genuine and romantic side, making their love story a true Hollywood fairy tale. He was genuine, charming, highly intelligent, insightful, moral, fearless, romantic, and hilarious, all wrapped up in drop-dead gorgeousness, said Eliza. After an unforgettable proposal in Venice, Italy, Eliza and Brandon were set to marry just 2 weeks after wrapping the production of The Crow. Brandon's role in The Crow was about to catapult him into stardom, but fate had a tragic twist in store. In The Crow, a noir supernatural thriller adapted from James O'Barr's graphic novel, Brandon portrayed Eric Draven, a rock and roll guitarist summoned by a mysterious crow to rise from the grave and seek vengeance for the murder of Draven and his fiancée Shelley on the eve of their Halloween wedding. By many accounts, The Crow was a film that brought Brandon immense excitement, and during its production he was having the time of his life. Brandon's perspective resonated in the line, "Because we do not know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well." This, he said, is the point of view that this character is coming from in the whole film, because it has been brought sharply into focus for him how precious each moment of his life is. On March 31st, 1993, in Wilmington, North Carolina, Brandon Lee was in the midst of filming a scene on the set.
This was the real scene which was shot. In this case, I completely agree with Linda Lee Cadwell, Eliza Hutton, because they wanted to make the film finish. And in this case, I completely agree with them.
Of his work and his excitement for the opportunity. Looking back, his sister says it would have seemed really unfair for him not to get to share that with the world. Brandon's remaining scenes were filmed using his stunt double, Chad Stahelski, who went on to direct the John Wick movies. Upon its eventual release in 1994, The Crow soared to remarkable heights, grossing over $94 million worldwide at the box office.
In anyone else in the role, Brandon Lee wasn't the first choice to play Eric Draven in The Crow. At first, producers wanted to cast an actual musician for the role of the murdered indie rocker. Names like Michael Jackson and Charlie Sexton were kicked around before the team realized there wouldn't be as much singing or performing as originally planned. Even then, Lee's name wasn't at the top of the list. Comic book writer James O'Barr wanted Johnny Depp to play the dark superhero, but in the end, Brandon Lee's martial arts experience and his smoldering good looks won him the role.
What are you supposed to be, a clown or something?
Sometimes. He was heavily involved with the film even before shooting began. According to The Independent, he also helped shape the story, convincing director Alex Proyas to remove a subplot because of its problematic Asian stereotyping. According to co-star John Polito, conditions on the set of The Crow were terrible. Lee reportedly lost 20 pounds while filming. Plus, the dark tale of revenge and murder was mostly filmed at night in North Carolina's freezing winter conditions. Lee was constantly getting drenched in water, and filming was constantly interrupted to fix his makeup. Lee reportedly filed a formal complaint against production conditions mere days before his death. In fact, things were so rough that his manager called producers in a rage, accusing them of trying to kill Lee.
Creatures of the night, they never learn.
During the scene in which Eric Draven crashes through the glass door of a pawn shop, Lee was cut badly by the prop glass, prompting Polito to express concern about all the physical risks his co-star was taking. All sorts of on-set injuries occurred.
That explosion during the shooting of The Crow, in which the actor Joe Polito got severely injured, and Brandon Lee, thanks to his physical abilities, escaped severe injuries and death. That was the first attempt to kill him. Now, Brandon Lee's mother,
fiancée Eliza Hutton, were both in favor of director Alex Proyas finishing The Crow. However, Linda filed a lawsuit against the production company, naming 13 people at fault for her son's wrongful death. The lawsuit was eventually settled out of court. Sadly, Lee and Eliza Hutton were set to be married just a couple of weeks from the day he died.
for the people who haven't watched my previous documentaries about Brandon Lee's murder, this is the official autopsy kindly released by the police. As you may see, I explain you the scene in which Brandon Lee was shot, and it wasn't the scene that 4 years made you believe. Here he had some little arts from blanks, because he didn't wear the bulletproof vest, so he had some arts, but with blanks. Instead, this one has been the fatal shot in the stomach under the belly, umbilico. This was the fatal shot. And this is the autopsy of Brandon Lee. I go on.
He likely would not make it, and by 1 p.m. he was announced dead.
Actor Brandon Lee, 28, died at 1:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Wednesday at New Hanover Regional Medical Center.
By the time...
And now, the scene in which was fatally shot, and then he will die 12 hours later in hospital. This is the real scene in which Brandon Lee was shot to death. I make you see a piece, then if you want to see more, you can watch my previous documentaries. I go.
Unthinkable happened. In the final scene, Brandon's character was shot with a .44 caliber revolver.
As I made you watch in the official autopsy, then the third shot was fatal. As soon as Michael Massey fired a gun, fall
to the floor. Everything went according to plan. The gun fired, the squib went off, and Lee fell. Only after Broyes said cut, everyone realized that Lee was not moving. Actor Michael Massey, who played the main character's enemy, shot Lee with a blank cartridge. Forward as planned, some time passed before others on set realized something was wrong. Everyone was busy working. The actor was wounded in the stomach. The bullet lodged in the spine.
Brandon Lee was taken to the New Hanover
Medical Center, where he underwent a 6-hour operation. Doctors transfused him with 7 liters of blood.
Fighting for his life for 12 hours.
But at 1:04 on March 31st, 1993, the young actor was declared dead. Loaded with theories. One of them told that Brandon was allegedly killed by the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia. The others told that it was jealous mistresses. There were also speculations that he was killed by a black demon that haunted his father as well. After the tragedy, filming was suspended. Director Alex Proyas initially did not want to continue working on the film at all. He was destroyed by the tragedy and so devastated that he did not have the strength to continue. It was only because Eliza and then the entire cast and crew reached out to him that he began to consider it. Those who became closer to the actor during the period of collaboration wanted to finish the film in his honor, since Brandon put a lot of time and effort into The Crow. Despite all the unpleasant events during filming, he worked hard without slowing down his pace and enthusiasm. Although, of course, not everyone agreed to continue working on the film.
Now, the shocking news: the tomb of Brandon Lee has been reopened.
Decades, the world has mourned the tragic loss of Brandon Lee, the rising Hollywood star who was taken far too soon. Son of martial arts icon Bruce Lee, he had a bright future ahead, but a tragic onset accident while he filmed The Crow cut his life short. Now, 32 years later, something unbelievable has happened. His tomb had to be opened for maintenance purposes, and what they discovered when the grave was removed left everyone in absolute shock. Could this finally bring long-awaited answers to the mystery of Brandon Lee's death?
Father and the son, but only the tomb of Brandon Lee cracked.
Cemetery in his hometown of Seattle. He rests next to his beloved father at this somber gravesite, where their timeless bond remains as absolute in death as it was in life. Thousands of fans visit the cemetery every year, honoring a legacy that fate destroyed too soon. And it's this constant affluence of people paying their respects that caused something Linda Lee Cadwell, Brandon's mother, could have never expected. After the 30th anniversary of Brandon Lee's death, Linda received a request from the Seattle City Council to permit grave maintenance.
According to authorities,
on which Brandon's remains rested was suspiciously unsettled, and an unexpected crack had appeared on the stone. Experts believed someone had voluntarily or involuntarily stepped on Brandon's grave, disturbing the ground and ruining the stone. But the crack could also have been caused by burrowing animals, a small quake that might have gone undetected above ground, or structural issues in the grave itself. The fact that Bruce Lee's grave seemed intact despite being so close to Brandon's was a mystery itself. To deny permission to open her son's tomb, but at the same time, she acknowledged that the site needed protection for future visitors. She knew full well how much people still loved and cherished Bruce and Brandon's memories, and she knew that fans across the planet would be heartbroken if the city of Seattle permanently denied them permission to visit their heroes' burial places. So she said yes.
Despite the request for privacy, fans got to know that the tomb of Brandon Lee had to be reopened, and so
gathered outside the cemetery as soon as the news spread. The tomb of Brandon Lee, the actor who had shocked the world with his untimely death on a movie set, was about to be opened after 32 years. And then, or was there something more? An eerie twist of destiny that Brandon Lee had unknowingly walked into. When his tomb was eventually opened, 32 years after his death, this chilling theory seemed to have found undeniable proof. Opening the tomb. It was a bright spring morning when maintenance workers of the Lakeview Cemetery in Seattle grabbed the headstone of Brandon Lee's tomb and moved it out of the way to reveal his coffin. Everything inside the small chamber appeared untouched. The air remained stationary and filled with respect, while a subtle essence from the burial ritual still clung to the atmosphere. Experts rushed to inspect the stone and the ground, looking for clues that could explain the sudden disturbances at the site. Beside the crack, the grave looked well preserved and showed no other signs of decay. The earth was stale and dry, confirming that no burrowing creatures had disturbed Brandon Lee's resting place. The experts' initial assessment seemed to be correct. Someone had, voluntarily or not, stepped onto Brandon's grave during a visit to the cemetery, ruining the stone but causing no further damage. As the authorities scrambled to produce a new stone to replace the cracked one, Linda Lee Cadwell found herself looking at the coffin that contained her son's body. She didn't know what to feel. On one hand, she was glad that this process would be over soon, and Brandon's rest would resume undisturbed. On the other, she felt an unexplainable pull towards the coffin and everything that rested inside. But before she could even lay a hand on the wood, something else caught her eye. On the ground, next to the coffin, were several items that Brandon's friends and colleagues had put inside the grave as a last farewell. Signed pictures, heartfelt letters, small memorabilia from movie sets, and other items were scattered on the earth, reminding her that her son had been loved until his very last moment. All memorial display items kept their funeral placement without any change despite the passage of time. Brandon's family and friends had protected the traditional burial customs so precisely that they established a timeless sanctuary. As they installed the new stone, the maintenance workers handled everything in the tomb with great respect. Every time they stumbled onto a new item, they would ask Linda whether she wanted to take a closer look. Despite being overcome with emotion, she decided to glance at some pictures, just to see her son smiling one more time. The most emotionally charged find within Brandon's tomb was an untouched collection of sealed letters that had waited since his burial. These weren't just correspondence, but final messages and tributes from those closest to him. Each letter was carefully preserved in specially treated envelopes to protect them from time's decay. Reading these letters after all these years would bring back both the pain of loss and the strength in continuing his work. Yet, could there be secrets within them that had never been made public? Linda found herself in a precarious position. If the letters had been sealed, perhaps the senders didn't want them to be opened. Perhaps those messages were meant for Brandon's eyes only. But what if she found something meant for her? The whole world had seen her standing over the grave on the day of the funeral. Maybe someone had decided to leave her something special to remember her beloved son by. With this possibility in mind, Linda decided to open the letters. Her eyes filled with tears as she read intimate details about Brandon's life, from his closest friends' points of view, shared dreams, and the future he had planned before his untimely passing. The preservation team noted how the letters shifted in tone from raw grief in the earliest ones to a growing determination in those written closer to the funeral. The later letters spoke of promises to ensure his legacy would live on, to protect his artistic vision, and to share his message with future generations. These weren't just farewell notes. They were a blueprint for keeping Brandon's vision alive, infused with the principles he lived by. Yet, among the carefully preserved correspondence, one letter stood apart. It was sealed differently, with a symbol that resembled intertwined dragons. Linda gasped in shock when she noticed the symbol. Bruce Lee's nickname was the Dragon, and she remembered how much Brandon cherished the story that stunned the world. When the preservation team carefully opened this distinctive envelope, they discovered something that shocked them. A final message from Brandon himself, written just days before his death, as if he had sensed what would come. In his characteristic hand,
it was in his unmistakable handwriting.
The letter said, "The journey we began together never ends. The limitations you perceive are illusions of the mind. Be water, flow through obstacles, adapt to challenges, and find strength in your formlessness. But above all, remember this. Your true path emerges not from following my way, but from discovering your own. Empty your cup to fill it with your wisdom." The message immediately brought tears to Linda's eyes. She hadn't expected to read something written by Brandon ever again, when a stunning thought struck her. Why would Brandon write something like this? Had he known his time was almost up? And who had put the letter in the coffin? Some of his friends or colleagues must have hidden the letter inside the grave. He didn't explain how he seemed to have known that his life was about to come to an abrupt end. Had something happened on or off set that might have made him nervous or even scared for his life?
And now, like I have anticipated you in the beginning of this documentary, the reason why Brandon Lee was murdered. Chilling.
His father wasn't just a man. He was a phenomenon who transcended the boundaries of martial arts and cinema, becoming a symbol of strength, discipline, and unyielding spirit. To millions, Bruce was a towering legend. To Brandon, he was Dad, a presence at once warm and intense. Raised between the bustling streets of Hong Kong and the sprawling suburbs of California, Brandon's early childhood was steeped in a unique blend of East and West. Unlike most children whose worlds revolved around playgrounds and cartoons, Brandon's playground was the dojo. His toys were sparring gloves and wooden dummies. From infancy, he was surrounded by the rhythmic thuds of fists meeting pads, the sharp commands of instructors, and the philosophy that his father lived and breathed. Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, a martial art not confined by rules but shaped by freedom and adaptability. Bruce's hands, roughened from decades of training and choreography, weren't just tools for fighting, they were instruments of expression, passion, and love. Brandon's earliest memories etched into his mind were the times when those hands would carefully hold his small body, teaching him balance, discipline, and respect. Bruce often said martial arts was a metaphor for life itself, fluid yet strong, calm yet powerful. Then came the shattering moment. In July 1973, the world lost Bruce Lee at just 32 years old. Brandon was only 8. The news arrived like a thunderclap, but to Brandon, it wasn't just the sudden absence of a father, it was the deafening silence that followed. Bruce's casket was closed, shielding his final moments from the world, and most painfully, from his son. The questions that should have been answered in gentle whispers were instead swallowed by secrecy. The world mourned a legend, but Brandon mourned a dad whose last words exploded in Brandon's heart. The public's adoration for Bruce Lee's myth clashed with Brandon's quiet grief, a grief tinged with confusion, and an unsettling feeling that his father's death was not as natural as it seemed. As he grew, this unease transformed into a determined quest for truth, a search that would eventually unravel unsettling secrets hidden behind the mask of fame. Being older meant Brandon could no longer ignore the fissures in the narrative around his father's death. As a curious teenager, he pored over news clippings, medical reports, and interviews, assembling a jigsaw puzzle that refused to fit neatly together. The official story, cerebral edema caused by an adverse reaction to a prescription painkiller, felt too sterile, too simple. Brandon discovered that the medical files were riddled with contradictions. The swelling in Bruce's brain was noted without any sign of trauma or injury. Witness statements conflicted on timelines and events leading up to his death. The autopsy itself had missing pieces, and some records appeared redacted or incomplete. What was more chilling were the whispered rumors Brandon heard. Stories of pressure, threats, and mysterious individuals lurking in the background of Bruce's final days. But perhaps the most haunting revelations came from Bruce's own hand. Brandon stumbled across fragments of his father's private notebooks, hidden away by family friends or forgotten in dusty drawers. These writings revealed a man grappling with paranoia, fearing betrayal from those closest to him. In his notes, Bruce expressed distrust towards certain figures in the entertainment industry, lamented about shadowy forces conspiring against him, and hinted at dangers he could neither fully expose nor escape. Actors, producers, and fans alike were eager to see Bruce Lee's legacy live on. They saw in Brandon not just a rising star, but a torchbearer, a cinematic heir. The offers came relentlessly, each one tethered to the Lee legend, martial arts thrillers, high-octane action flicks, roles that leaned heavily on his heritage and physical prowess. By the time Rapid Fire hit theaters, Brandon had transformed from an aspiring actor to a bona fide action star. His moves were precise, his charisma undeniable. Yet beneath the roar of the crowd and flashes of the camera, a silent exhaustion gnawed at him. It wasn't the physical toll, training, stunts, relentless schedules that wore him down. It was the constant echo of comparison. Every scene, every line, surrounded by martial arts posters and worn-out scripts. Brandon's pen scratched feverishly across yellowed pages. There were entries about unexplained phone calls, calls that came in late at night, voices whispering on the other end, their identities cloaked in static. Other notes hinted at missing files, confidential documents Bruce had once kept, but which had mysteriously vanished from his personal effects after his death. One of the most chilling passages read, "He was alone when he died, but they made sure he would be." This sentence, repeated in slightly different forms throughout his writings, seemed like a dark mantra. Who were they? Brandon never wrote names outright, but the implication was clear. There was a conspiracy surrounding his father's final days. Driven by these shadowed thoughts, Brandon began obsessively retracing the last known moments of Bruce Lee's life. He re-examined the timeline with an almost forensic eye. The strange collapse during the Hong Kong filming in early May 1973, the sudden onset of headaches and seizures, the mysterious delays in medical treatment, and finally, the rapid, unexplained death in July. Every detail seemed fraught with gaps and anomalies. He questioned the people closest to Bruce, his manager, his doctors, even the actors who had been on set the day Bruce fell ill. Brandon mulled over rumors of prescription drugs, of hidden enemies, of jealousy and betrayal within the martial arts community and Hollywood. He studied the last meal Bruce had eaten, the last meeting he attended, and the last script he had read. Was there poison in the words he was given to say, or in the pills prescribed to him? Behind closed doors, Brandon confided to a trusted few that he believed his father had been silenced, targeted because of what he represented, what he threatened to expose, or simply because his rise was too bright and too fast. But this belief came with a dangerous burden.
When Brandon
stepped onto the set of The Crow, it was clear to everyone watching that something fundamental had shifted in him. Gone was the young actor cautiously carving a path in the shadow of a legendary name. In his place stood a man who was focused to the point of obsession, a perfectionist bent on controlling every aspect of his environment. His intensity manifested in peculiar ways. Crew members whispered among themselves as Brandon methodically inspected every prop weapon before a scene, asking for safety checks to be repeated, and never allowing a gun to be handed over without personally verifying its status. The actor was meticulous to an almost unsettling degree. The Crow itself was a dark tale, about a man brutally murdered who returns from the dead, a spectral avenger haunting the night to bring justice for a love stolen too soon. For Brandon, the film was no mere role. It was a living metaphor for the struggle he carried inside. He dove deep into the character's psyche, insisting on stripping away any supernatural or mystical elements that might trivialize death. He wanted the story raw, visceral, grounded in the harsh reality of loss and revenge, not cloaked in fantasy or lighthearted mockery.
The cast and crew noticed the strange, intently.
A shadow lurking beneath his calm exterior. Some whispered of a premonition, an ominous energy that clung to him. The symbolism was undeniable. A man haunted by death, preparing to rise again through art, even as the world outside watched, unaware. But beneath the surface, the lines between character and man blurred. The rituals Brandon imposed on himself weren't just method acting. They were a desperate attempt to confront a past that refused to rest. The Crow wasn't just a movie for Brandon Lee. It was a warning, a prophecy, and a reckoning all wrapped into one.
After the death of Brandon Lee,
ended Brandon's life, investigators found a small, worn journal in his apartment. At first glance, it appeared to be little more than the fragmented musings of a troubled young man, a mix of diary entries, random thoughts, and cryptic symbols. But as forensic archivists and code breakers sifted through its pages, a chilling pattern emerged. The journal was layered with repeated phrases in coded language, as if Brandon had been trying to communicate without speaking aloud. Phrases like, eyes watching, traitor in the circle, and sick not sick appeared over and over again, scattered across years of writing. These weren't just paranoid ramblings. They were clues, breadcrumbs left by a man who believed he was trapped in a web of betrayal and danger. The final page was the most haunting of all. It had been torn from the notebook, crumpled, then carefully reinserted between two covers, as if Brandon had hesitated, then decided the truth needed to be preserved. There, in sharp, unambiguous handwriting, were 5 words that shattered any notion of speculation or metaphor. My father was called. The sentence was underlined twice with a steady hand, a mark of conviction and finality. Below it, a signature in the same ink sealed the confession, along with a date, only 3 nights before Brandon's own life was cut short. There was no doubt what he meant, no room for misinterpretation. It was a declaration and a plea, an accusation and a warning carved into the pages that would outlast him. In those few words lay the heart of a mystery that had haunted 2 generations, a legacy of silence, suspicion, and a truth too dangerous to speak aloud, until now when Brandon Lee's final words revealed a shocking truth about Bruce Lee's death. The tape they found. The discovery came unexpectedly during a routine search of Brandon's personal effects after his tragic death. Tucked away in an unassuming box, nestled among worn notebooks and faded photographs, was a microcassette. The label was handwritten, nearly illegible, but clear enough to read. If I'm Gone. It was a haunting title, like a final message meant to be heard only if Brandon didn't survive to tell his story himself. The tape clicked on with a faint hiss. Then his voice emerged, calm, measured, yet carrying an unmistakable weight of urgency. Brandon spoke slowly, deliberately, as if each word was both confession and confessionary. He recounted what had become his obsession over the past years, hidden medical reports he had obtained through contacts in the industry. These were not routine checkups or trivial health notes. They suggested anomalies, inconsistencies in the official narrative of Bruce's death. Most chilling of all was the secret recording Brandon revealed he had come across, a phone call from his father's final days. The tape crackled with distant voices, tense and guarded. Bruce's own voice was on it, strained but defiant. The other voices? Indistinct shadows. Brandon described them as people from the inside, powerful, unseen figures pressuring Bruce, manipulating his fate in ways nobody dared speak aloud. Brandon explained how this revelation changed everything. The making of The Crow was no longer just a career milestone, it was a symbolic battleground. The film's themes, resurrection, revenge, confronting unseen forces, were eerily parallel to Brandon's own life and fears. He saw himself in the role, not as a fictional character, but as a man trapped in a cycle of threats and silence. His voice lowered to a whisper, fragile, yet defiant. They won't say it, but I will. My father was killed, and now they're watching me. The tape ended abruptly.
After all these new chilling discoveries, diaries, copybooks, it's really the time to give justice to Brandon Lee, who easily cracked his tomb, because it's really the time to give justice to Brandon Lee, and so also to Bruce Lee.